So everybody who has joined us again for day 4 of the China Market Entry Workshop Series, thank you very much for coming in. Today is supposed to be a live Q&A, but Manfred and I were not sure how many people were actually going to show up, because whenever we ask for live Q&As, people get a bit hesitant about going live and asking questions and whatnot. So I did come with a preparation to-do list. So, you know, the whole idea of this workshop series is, okay, I've learned about data, the importance of data, value proposition. I've learned about business models, budgeting. I've learned about ecosystem and what that entails. Now, some of you might be overwhelmed and lost by all of this information and might not actually know where to actually start on the action plan and to-do list. So this is why I have actually created, for the last 2 years since COVID, a type of China roadmap, because I did see a lot of people getting blocked in terms of their market entry strategy into China, as well as their execution. And so I created this roadmap, which basically has 3 milestones. The first milestone is opportunity. The second milestone is implementation, and the third milestone is growth, because ultimately that's everybody's objective, is they want to grow and scale in that market, whether it's growing by headcount, growing by revenue, growing by volume of business. Everybody has the ambition to grow in the market. What I want people to be aware of is 3 important factors associated with this, which is awareness, having consistent awareness of what's going on in your China business, consideration, which comes in the form of data research and whatnot, and then decision-making. You can't grow in the Chinese market without actually executing and making decisions. So to put a little bit of humor on all of this, I've actually nicknamed the 9 things, the 9 action points that you have to do as the 9 superpowers, because I do believe they are superpowers. They are what you need to be able to grow and scale in the market. So again, to get cracking, the idea of this is that we're going to work it like as if it's a workbook. And like I said, I will be sending these slides out to everybody so that you can print it off and actually watch the recording again and go through it and understand what you actually have to do. So superpower number 1 is education. You've got to build a knowledge base on not just how to do business in China, but it's more than that. It's understanding what the consumer trends are. It's understanding what the people want. It's understanding regulation, legislation. It's understanding, you know, even simple salary guidelines. It's understanding all the aspects you need to know to operate your business, grow your business. Knowledge is power.
Christina?
Yeah, Manfred?
You know, China is so big and the topic is so big, and the things that one might not know or the thing one might be interested in are so big. So the first question would be, you know, where to start?
So that's a good point. Where do you start? So my goal from everybody today is to actually find 5 sources of free information where you can continuously educate yourself in China. All right. Now, the first 2 are very easy. One is Manfred's newsletter. One is my newsletter. Okay, if you subscribe to our mailing lists, you're already getting consistent information on specific aspects of doing business in China. The third thing I would do is, from whichever country you are from, so I'm going to use the UK as an example, is subscribe to the mailing list of the China-Britain Business Council. It costs you nothing to subscribe. And you get free information, you get free articles. I'm not even asking you to become a member. I'm just asking you to subscribe to the mailing list and read it. They send out a lot of content, a lot of news updates, a lot of issues relationship-wise between the UK and China. They have also a magazine where they send out, I think it's once every 2 weeks, the top 5 articles from the monthly magazine. It is a fantastic, I use it as a source of information, of growing my knowledge base, right? So that's already 3. The 4th one would be a law firm. So I subscribe to many law firms in China because they get the legislation and the details and they translate it actually immediately, much quicker than I ever do. But I would subscribe to a law firm's mailing list, a Chinese law firm. Now, there are hundreds of law firms out there in China. They all have newsletters. For me, one of the best is King & Wood and Mallisons. They are a large law firm. Their prices are associated with that, but it doesn't mean that their content is not good. Their content is great and their content is free. Okay. And the fifth one is also related to the associations, but local associations in China. So for me, again, I'm subscribed to all of them because again, mailing lists are free of charge. But I subscribe to the American Chamber of Commerce Shanghai's mailing list. I subscribe to the British Chamber of Commerce Shanghai mailing list, the Canadian Chamber, the Finnish Chamber, which might be all weird, but I do want to know what's happening with the Nordic countries and China, etc. If you are from Germany, there are 3 associations in Germany that cater to China specifically. You have China Forum Bayern, you have the Ostasiatische Verein, you also have the Deutsch-Chinesische Vereinigung. So every country has China-related associations. Search them out, subscribe to them. Subscription is free, and that's how you will get your education. Now, obviously, there are plenty of other corporate service providers that also have weekly newsletters. I'm not really going to reveal to you who my competitors are on this live recording and give you that easy away information, but all their newsletters are also free of charge, right? And you might feel, oh, I don't want to get bombarded by content. Get bombarded by content. Nobody is asking you to read these things straight away. I actually have a folder in my mail section where I keep all of these articles so that when I do have a spare moment, like during my lunch hour, I open it up and I read 1 or 2 articles and I get myself updated, right? That's how you are going to educate yourself. And please, these are 5 very simple items, 5 mail subscriptions where you can actually get yourself educated. Manfred, is there anything you want to add on to that?
Many things, but let me pick 2. For the last 2.5 years, all of us kind of got used so much to online presence and online learning. You can pick and choose from so many webinars like this one and like this week. I think that also quite easily allows you to limit the time you need actually for learning and for kind of getting more know-how. And also quite easily you can focus on certain topics that are of interest. And you can even, like in Christina's case or in our case, upfront kind of have a preview to see, because, sometimes we learn better if there's people that we somehow like, or their way of presentation is kind of, close to what we want and need. Have a look up front and then, you go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
That's the first one. The second one, I think, although it seems a bit outdated these days, but at the end of the day, that classical old school workshop where you need to travel to a place where that workshop will be. It doesn't cost a lot of money, it costs a lot of time. And the other hand side, it's not just kind of listening to that person or the people who are speaking there, it's also forging that network with the other participants that are there.
It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone, actually, because you're building your ecosystem and learning at the same time. Yeah.
Back in the days, I used to do a lot of presence workshops, and one of the key messages to the participants was to make sure to kind of, keep helping each other, ask each other, stay in touch, because most likely, they're in a similar positions, and that kind of is, you don't get cheaper advice, you don't get cheaper support. So that's 2 things that I would want to kind of add here.
Absolutely. Superpower number 2 is research. We highlighted this on Monday, talking a lot about getting data to understand who your competitors are, who your clients are, and what is your value proposition. Do not underestimate the value that data can offer you. because ultimately this data is going to evaluate the opportunities that are in China and what return on investment you're going to get from those opportunities, right? You need to be able to understand the extent of which China is really a market for you. And I just want to highlight here, not all of you might be ready yet for China, right? We're talking broadly about China market entry 2022, 2023. So you have to evaluate this, you have to learn it. So an action point for that would be really understanding what data points do you have today that are making you feel confident about grasping the opportunity in China, but knowing that if you were now to meet the board of directors and you would have to convince them of going into the Chinese market, what data do you still need? Because you know those questions are going to be raised in that board meeting. Okay. And this is where validation comes into play. Talking with experts on this type of brainstorming before you meet with the board.
And I think these two things are crucial, right? The data itself and your internal processes and the format that it needs for these processes within your organization. You need to consider both, because just having a sort of PDF that says China is a large market will not be kind of what you need in order to convince your board or CEO or the owners.
So one thing I also want to say about the data aspect is that, and let me go back to the types of data. Manfred went through this. I just took out pieces from the presentation on Monday in terms of what I see as important research elements, from everything from market segmentation to competitor benchmarking, brand awareness, etc. Right? Is investors, and I see this with my clients, investors who have to be the ultimate decision makers on China really only care about numbers. They don't really care about how you're going to do all of this. What they want to see is, if I'm going to invest 100,000 euros into this project in China, when am I going to get that 100,000 euros back? And then when am I going to get actually dividends from this project? When am I actually going to make the profit, right?
And they want to see that you protect against the risk.
Exactly. So when you are focusing on these types of presentations, right, make sure that this all translates then to creating your strategy, your business plan, and your budget, where you are highlighting numbers. Okay. And at the same time, you don't want to overwhelm them with the wrong numbers. You can say overall in one sentence, there is an opportunity in China because 100 million people, through a focus study that we created, are interested in our product. You don't have to show the graphs associated with that study. Nobody's interested. You've already made the statement. Now let's look at the financial numbers that are going to bring you to the next stage. And a lot of people have problems putting pen to paper, right, in regards to the game plan, the phased business approach, and the budget and the financial plan. So again, when you're analyzing your China strategy, right, whether you do this in a PowerPoint presentation or who cares, ultimately, as an investor, I couldn't care what format you show it to me in. All I care about is, what chapters have you put in there, right? Have you thought about every single aspect of the China business and highlighted each point within this presentation? What budget line items are potentially missing? Have you really gone into an in-depth detail for every single line item? And do you need help? So, I mean, this is a service that we offer to clients where we validate business plans and budgets. Basically, I spend 90 minutes going through, actually, I act as a fake board member. So clients will present to me their presentations that they have prepared with their budgets. And I act as the board member, raising questions, raising doubt. Have you thought about this? I still see something missing here. And I act as that brainstorming. Again, this is just to validate everything prior to actually meeting with the board or the directors or the owner, so that you have everything validated. Understand who you're going to collaborate on these points, okay? This for me is milestone one. This is truly evaluating the opportunity that exists in China. It's getting educated, it's doing the data research, and it's putting pen to paper. And I also want to highlight, this is just not a one-time action. These three superpowers are something that have to be consistently done throughout your China journey, if not quarterly, monthly, right? It's something that just, if you don't do it once, put it in a drawer and say, I got the green light, now let's go. No. These three actions are something that if you want to build momentum, have to be continuously done. Manfred, do you want to add anything?
You want to go one slide back, maybe, Christina?
Sure.
Especially kind of on point 2 here, creating that phased business plan. What we do quite a lot with clients is actually to help them. There's a tool that we've developed called the China Roadmap, which is quite convenient kind of, to see which pieces go where and to create a timeline. Because essentially that's what it is. And I see quite often that people have challenges with kind of, seeing these steps and timelining these steps. Because once it's timelined, everything then is just a couple of to-dos. Once you start breaking them down into smaller work packages, it becomes digestible. But in both cases, whether you wanna have kind of that session with Christina for checking on the board, or whether you don't know exactly, reach out to Christina or to myself.
I think Manfred, just to highlight, even before doing the roadmap with Manfred, or even doing the business plan validation, a great first step is to do a China strategy workshop. So that we have an overview of what your game plan is, which is point 1. What is your game plan for China? Then we can go into the next steps in terms of creating this timeline, or just getting validation around your whole strategy, right?
Absolutely.
So it's also being aware what providers on the ground in China can offer you as tools to assist you, so that you don't feel alone going into the market and feel alone having to convince a board of directors on what has to be done, right? Going on to superpower number 4, which is ecosystem. We spent 1 hour yesterday all about talking about building and empowering business ecosystem. The idea is that you need to understand who is in your current network and who do you still need to have in your current network, right? If you haven't seen yesterday's session or yesterday's recording, please go back and watch that, because both Manfred and I went through the actual physical people that you should have as a minimum in your ecosystem to support your business, right? So as an action plan, again, just let's do manageable steps, right? Who in your ecosystem today can help you, right? Obviously, it's important to know where do you need help, but that's why the first 3 superpowers are so important. You need to know what knowledge you have to have the data, and you have to know what you're going to put in your China strategy and what might be missing, right? Then you can evaluate who do you actually need to support that, or who do you need to actually be part of the conversation with the board of directors to convince them of the China project, right? But I would love everybody to list the top 5 people that they have in their current ecosystem that can help them push this project forward. And then I want you to evaluate from those 5 people, what do they do? What sector are they in? What industry are they in? And what can they help? And how can they help? And have you actually approached them to help you? Because if you haven't even done that part, then they're of no use to you. You need to execute and ask for help, right? The next step thereafter is evaluating who do you still need in your ecosystem to push this project forward. And all this requires is communication. It's understanding, having phone calls, understanding what do you need, where are you going, how can they help you, and then knowing, okay, they have limitations, so I've got to find somebody who can fit with where they cannot offer me something. For example, I'm not a marketeer. I'm not a branding manager. I don't do anything in media. So potentially you need somebody in the media space to help you and advise you. And I cannot emphasize this more. First calls are free, guys. Never feel the pressure that somebody is going to charge you for something. The first conversation is free of charge and can last up to an hour.
And I think something that I would want to add, is for China, but also for people in general, is go through your network. It is different to us if Christina is referring somebody, or if that somebody is kind of coming from nowhere. That's something I think that's just very human. There's nothing special to this. It's just to state the facts and the obvious, but to remind you. And at the same time, the China community, or at least I think the real ones, the good ones, are used to contact sharing.
Yes.
If you hit somebody that's kind of, hiding and not opening up anything, I don't know, it normally is a red flag for me.
For me, it means they don't know anybody. That's my interpretation.
That's
absolutely.
A red flag, right?
Yes. Actually, what frustrates me a lot also is when I refer somebody and then I find out 1 month later that conversation still hasn't happened. Because again, conversations are free of charge, especially the first ones. And you can get so much data from these first calls, so much information, or being referred to somebody who you can then have another follow-up conversation. Use this, talk to people.
I think the trick really is, as Christina said, knowing what you need, right? Once you have that table on your sheet of paper where it says, I need info here, I need info there, I need exactly this type of info, or I need exactly that type of person, you already have at least, 50% of what needs to be done covered. But getting to that point of understanding exactly kind of what you're needing, that's what I see takes quite a lot of people, quite a lot of time.
Exactly. Superpower number 5 is protection. Fraud exists, not just in China, it exists anywhere in the world. Okay, it's not just that China is special with fraud. I know every single jurisdiction in the world that has fraud. So how are you going to protect your business? Do you know what needs to be protected? And usually the answer is, well, common sense is telling me certain things, but actually I don't have a to-do list. Well, voila, we have a recipe pack for you today in terms of what needs to be protected for your China business. What I want people to realize is I do not know a single friend, colleague, business partner, client who has not experienced some sort of fraud in their China journey. I don't know of a single one. So your expectation should be, it will happen to me at some point in time. And it will happen to me probably when I'm at my weakest, where I don't have all the holes plugged into my business. What I want people to realize is that from day one of going into China, your foundation should be that you plug those holes immediately and you get into a consistent routine of constantly checking that your assets are protected. How are you going to protect those assets? It's by creating system processes and management directives. It's about creating operational guidelines, doing health checks, internal audits every so often. It's understanding who you're appointing as the decision makers for the China business. It's about having third parties that can have an overview of your organization and can raise red flags on your behalf. And most importantly, it's executing that. If you are the leader of your China business, then that's your role as the head of strategy, the head of China. It's to implement and execute these processes. Now, just as a starting point.
One back, please. One back.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, you go with that one first, and then I kind of add my 50.
Okay. I was just going to say that preemption by action is your best and least expensive form of protection. And I know too many companies, myself included, who have paid exorbitant amounts of money out of my China budget to save the business, ultimately. All right. So if you have this to-do list, nobody can ever say, I did not know. We're giving it to you as part of this workshop. All right. So before I go to that list, Manfred.
Look, I want to emphasize on 2 topics of the fraud. First, the money, and second, the person in charge. in terms of the money, at the end of the day, is not so difficult. You want to do really at least two things. You want to kind of install a set of rules with the bank that there are certain limits. Above certain limits, it needs a counter signature. Now I'm talking about having a bit of a team in China, having a bit of an entity, yeah, and making sure that the people and the team there do not start fraudulent behavior. That is the first thing. The second thing is also, in terms of limiting to where and how you can actually transfer money. The banks are very good at that one. So you just want to make sure you put these rules and regulations in place.
You can also outsource the banking functions to accounting firms. I mean, we offer that service as well to protect you.
You make sure you have that in place at the very beginning, because if you start noticing kind of weird behavior from your GM, it's too late to put that in place. Or put differently, the dynamics that you kind of starting, if you then start to put that in, will make it even more difficult to recover kind of from the situation that you're in. And I think that is something important. And the second thing kind of, goes to the power that you give your GM, be very aware of that, what you delegate to this person and what you don't. And also kind of make sure that not all the power sits within that person, Don't just leave all the so-called bureaucratic stuff to that person, then having him the jobs and being the legal representative and everything, divide and distribute that a little bit, so that in case later on there is disagreements, you can easily step out of this and then simply need to, to switch, for example, the general manager, which then, if you are prepared for it, comes easy. If you're not prepared for it, kind of becomes a real hassle.
An issue, yeah. So the checklist, what needs to be done, right? Again, this is just a checklist. Not everything is included here, but at least it's a starting point for you to analyze what has to be done. Trademark search, trademark registration, fundamental. That also leads to other aspects. Do you need patent registrations to be done? Do you need copyright registrations to be done? Domain registration, website development, marketing material, product registrations. Do you need special licenses or qualifications for your project, for your products to be able to import them? Create a vetting procedure, a due diligence procedure on partners, on third parties, whether that's a financial background check or vetting through references, whatever the case might be. It's creating operational guidelines. Now, I say this because China moves fast. If you hire a salesperson or you hire a business development manager, they need to understand what their thresholds are for negotiation, what discounts they can offer. They need this guideline to be able to go off, talk to clients, and not wait with the time zone issues to ask questions of what they can and cannot do. You don't want that to be something to halt your business. So creating operational guidelines for your sales team, marketing team, finance team, and creating also then management directives. What can your senior managers do and not do without approval?
Christina, there's a question from John he would like to raise.
Hi, Christina. Thanks very much. One of the things that I've been dealing in China since sort of like the early 90s, so one of the old ones. And when we first started working in China, we spent a lot of time with the concept of face in China. And I wondered, I'm seeing a change in the relationships we're having with people coming into business now. How important, and this harps back to your thing about fraud and IP, because I did in products. How important is face now in China? Do you still see that? Because we've experienced exactly as you said when we started up. We had people on our books who were, taking bribes, inspectors, all the rest of it. You know the story well. And I was just interested, how are you finding the next generation of people coming along? Do you see any changes in that? Or is it the same as we had when we started out, where it's really, this face issue is still important in China?
I think I'm going to reflect it on the new generation. I think face is still something that exists. And I think that people react when, let me put it in a different way. I think generally speaking, if somebody is shocked that they got caught, they're going to do something. So, I don't really want to use the word they've lost face. I would say they've been caught. And as a consequence of being caught, they're now in trouble. And what are they going to do to either save themselves, or what is the company going to do to punish them, becomes more valid. I don't know anymore with the millennials if you can actually call it the cultural face where they've lost face. I think it's more they got caught by doing something naughty. They have either been terminated or whatever the case might be, the contracts are closed and shut. And the question is, do they then take you to court? And I feel that millennials nowadays are very brash and are willing to take people to court, more so than in past times. And I say that because I've just had 2 employees who have taken 2 of my clients to court for what they considered as wrongful termination, even though there is proof and evidence that they did things wrong.
Thank you for that. I mean, that sort of mirrors my sort of experience of it. And one of the things that I raise it for is that your excellent thing on providing data and validation is that those people that have their hands on the checkbook in investments are those people that will hark back to a time of when we started in China. And I think it's the education of that there are new processes, new ways. It's evolving all the time.
It is evolving.
Yeah, so that's just something on my side of it, and thank you for sort of validating that point for me. So, so I will mute myself now and let you carry on.
Thanks, John. Just to continue with this checklist, the left side of this slide is basically highlighting your to-do list, even if you don't have an entity on the ground. The items that are listed on the right side are actually the key decisions that have to be made if you are going to establish an entity on the ground. Okay. What's the business scope, the capital investment, register office address, corporate management, and all of those things. But again, it's a to-do list, right? It's how are you going to protect your business? It's getting all of these details should actually be highlighted within your China strategy and should be shared with the board members, investors, because ultimately I mean, if I was an investor, I would definitely come out and say, well, how do you know these partners are good? What are their references like? Who have they worked with? What's their financial position? Do we have to offer credit terms? Are there operational guidelines? How are you going to manage the team? That would be another thing. How are you going to manage the team, right? How are you going to take care of the team? Who is the one who's going to do all of that? Manfred, do you want to add anything on that point?
All good, Christina, all good.
Okay. Then it's moving on to superpower number 7. And at this point, we're hitting milestone number 3, which is growth, right? Like I said early on, everybody's ambition in China is to grow and be profitable. And like Manfred highlighted in Monday's session, most people have the highest of expectations where they say, we want 30% of our global business to just be in China, or even 50%, right? How can you grow to that level if actually you haven't even achieved superpowers 1 to 6, which really are the foundations of the business? Once those foundations are there and you've checked that to-do list, and again, it's all about consistency. You have to continuously check your brand assets or your assets for China. Are they protected? Make sure you are consistently doing that. That should be a habit that goes into your calendar and you're always checking it. But if you don't have that foundation, I do not know how you're going to achieve the next 3 superpowers. Because if it's anything like me, in my first 5 years in China, I didn't have the right foundation, and I kept going back to the first 6 superpowers and not actually growing and scaling at all. And what did that mean? It meant that number 1, I couldn't achieve superpower number 7 because I didn't have a sound accounting system in China, and I didn't actually read my management reports because I thought, well, I'm anyway a startup. I'm not making money yet. What's the point? I know this doesn't make sense, but back in those days, that was actually what everybody, when I was asking my friends, we just had a Shanghai reunion with my friends from 20 years ago that I met in Shanghai. And we were all talking about how naive and innocent we were back when we were in our 20s, managing operations in China, and how we were not thinking as we are today about looking, reading P&Ls, balance sheets, and making that a part of our daily task list. Getting daily numbered reports.
I think if I want to, if I may add something here, Christina, it's just, there's so many things going on when you kind of come to China, especially when you are the foreigner that's just within, let's say, year 1 to year 3. Those first 3 years is just the sort of orientation phase where there's a lot to learn, there's a lot of mistakes to be made, and a lot of things that look different to be understood better. And I think what helps really a lot is either through a sort of mentor or a sort of guy in the headquarters or a person like Christina or myself, kind of, to understand what to focus on. And that goes for both the top man or top woman in China, as well as the top man or woman in HQ responsible for China, for both. Because as you see in our logo, it's about the bridge. You need to have that strong connection. If that's not there, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as a to-do list, I want to highlight 2 scenarios. One is you have a subsidiary in China that is transacting. Are you checking the numbers? Are you receiving the financial management reports on a monthly basis? Are you receiving them in English? Do you actually set up appointments with your finance team, whether it's an outsourced provider or somebody in-house, to discuss each line item? Has the number gone up? Has the number gone down? How do we compare it with the budget? Do you understand each line item? You might even find that in these conversations, you have to do adjustments because your finance team didn't book things in the right line items. That's the whole point of these meetings. And if you don't have a company in China, but are transacting with China, are you keeping a separate P&L for the China business? And are you doing exactly those same functions? Are you sitting down with the finance team to discuss each line item?
And I think also, again, to interject here, Christina, especially at the very beginning, I think it's important on 2 ways, kind of coming from Christina's terminology. It's the superpower of education, to educate yourself on what's going on. But it's also, from a different perspective, you need to bring yourself and the team on the same page. There simply are a lot of differences out there. And sooner or later, they'll come to get you. So, having that sort of monthly session to discuss and to also go into detail, especially if they say, oh, that's different in China, to kind of see and understand where, why, and how, and is that actually kind of booked correctly? That gives you, that gives you the foundation, a very sound understanding of what's going on, but also of the perception of your team. And that is very, very, very important to be on the same page.
Exactly. And if you don't have this foundation and you don't actually look at these numbers, I do not know how you're going to achieve superpower number 8, which is analysis. Because the head of China, the head of strategy, has to analyze the business on a daily basis. And the starting point of analysis is with your numbers. You're not going to talk to the sales team unless you know what the revenue levels are like. You're not going to talk to your supply chain managers unless you know what the costs of goods or services are. You're not going to talk to your marketing team until you see the full breakdown of marketing costs month to month. So how can you actually analyze the business and pivot the business, right? If you don't see these numbers and you don't understand these numbers and you can't interpret these numbers. Analysis, and I can't emphasize this more, it became so clear to me during 2020 at the start of the pandemic. You know, all of a sudden everybody was like, how are we going to survive? And all of a sudden they wanted to see cash flow analyses. And all of a sudden they were saying, Christina, we want this. I said, guys, I send this to you every month. You have it in your email. You have all of this data. It's just you never open it, which is why I'm adamant about having monthly phone calls. But there were a lot of people that didn't even know they had this information already readily available at their fingertips. And you immediately saw that they were not analyzing it whatsoever. As long as they could see the trajectory of China growing, actually, they didn't look into the details. They felt safe. The minute that the trajectory went down, oh my God, chaos. All right. Doesn't have to be chaos. If you consistently look at your numbers and analyze. Just to give you an example, every Friday, and this is just part of our service, and this is again something you should be looking at as the value add with other providers, is every Friday we send the accounts receivables. We also provide a full bank statement list to our clients every Friday. Obviously, I don't have a phone call every Friday, nor does my team have a phone call every Friday. But we know that our clients have an overview every single Friday as to what their accounts receivables are and what their bank statement looks like. What's their bank balance, what has come in, what's gone out. I mean, it's basically a cash flow analysis every single Friday. You hope and pray that people are opening up these documents so they can actually then make decisions. Should we then on Monday talk to a couple of customers? Should we then ask for why payments are not being made? This is the insight you need. As an outsourced provider, I can't put a gun to my clients' heads to read these things, but at least the China leaders should be opening those documents and taking action then on the Monday with their sales teams, with the teams that they are developing, right?
And again, I mean, coming in here, you know, cash flow is just extremely important. 2020 showed that in a very extreme way. But again, you know, in China it doesn't help you if there's a lot of revenue, you know, if your bills are not being paid, if there's cash flow issues, that is a problem, full stop.
It is. And then it's also, it prevents you from communicating with your teams and doing it at the moment that it should be done in. If you're not getting paid from a customer, but your staff is still selling to that customer, right? Why are they still selling? At some point, you got to build a block, right? Until you get paid, you don't continue to provide goods. How do you know whether they can ever pay you? But if you don't have that communication with your sales team and say, hey, you know, what's going on with the customer? Are they in financial difficulty? Should we have a conversation with them? As soon as you get the information, take action, right? And superpower number 9 is focus. There are so many things to think about when starting in China, when developing your business in China. I mean, we've gone through 9 superpowers just now. There's so much to think about. The last 3 days has probably overwhelmed a lot of people with the information and the to-do list that has to happen. You got to focus and prioritize, okay? You got to look at your China strategy, look at your numbers, analyze that, and then place focus and prioritize on what are your first action plans. You can't do everything at once. It's impossible. So focus on what that is. And a lot of the times, the focus will probably be spent on firefighting, on fixing things, but it could also be spent on strategic expansion, whether it's vertical or horizontal. So I do want people to achieve all of these superpowers, right? And ultimately be able to consistently focus on what are the priorities within the business. There are too many GMs out there that aren't focusing on what's actually needed in the strategy of the business.
Very true.
Manfred, anything else you want to add?
All good.
All good? Well, I mean, that's the end of the action list. And like I said, I'll be sending this workbook to everybody so that they can print it out, use it themselves. And what we would love to know from everybody is also, what has been your takeaway from the last 4 days? We would also love to know, what action plans are you going to take? Do you need help in any shape or form? If you want to share what your next 3 things are going to be to execute in the next 30 days, send us an email. You don't have to send it into the public form, but you could just send private emails to Manfred and I. Or if you want to send us an NDA first before discussing, we're also open and free to do that as well. But sometimes it helps to talk and brainstorm, and ultimately to finish off the workbook, highlight what the 3 main actions are going to be, right? So that's the end, guys. That's the end of our 4-day workshop. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you do have any questions, you're just unmute yourselves. And we do have one open quick China strategy session still available.
That's already taken.
Oh, okay.
Xia has kind of reached out to me in between. So
okay.
no, the free ones are gone. Of course,
Okay.
we've got more, but then you need to pay for them.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. Well, sorry, I shouldn't have jumped the gun. I wasn't looking at
All good, all good, all
on
good.
the
all good.
on the chat box.
But I
Thank-
mean, in any way, if there is an interest or a need kind of to discuss future plans, reach out to Christina or myself. We can book a quick strategy workshop to look at your next 3 years ahead. But also, once again, that suggestion to don't just reach out to us kind of when you think now we want to actually set up a company. Come as early as you can, maybe we can help you directly. Maybe we can pinpoint you in the right direction. It's about building momentum, and Christina and myself can help you with that. And that's what we do, and that's what we're here for.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you for joining. For those that joined all 4 days, thank you for participating all 4 days.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Exactly. And we'll see everybody again very soon. All the best.
Any question on your end still, Charles?
I just wanted to, after 4 days, show my face and thank you both for all this information. I think you guys really made a good team, and I know it's difficult when you're just sort of speaking to a bunch of people with their cameras off. So hello and thank you.
Thanks.
That's much
Thanks,
appreciated, Charles. At least seeing a face.
All right, thanks, folks. I will
Thank
be in
you.
touch. This was terrific.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. All the best.